Live streaming. Hi.
Welcome to Heavy Can Read You Story.
How's everyone doing today? Got a notification. Oh, I'm live. That's amazing. Okay, so we're going to start with chapter 7 today in The Horse and His Boy. We're going to start with Proverbs. Hey, Kimmy, can you let Becca know that we're live? So this is the last chapter of Proverbs that we're reading on the last day of April, which is actually the 1st of May. So I hope you have enjoyed Proverbs. This is the last we'll have of it for a while. You're welcome to read it on your own. It's a good book. I highly recommend it to everyone. All right. So chapter 31. The words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. What are you doing, my son? What are you doing, son of my womb? What are you doing, son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to take strong drink, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed, and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to the one who is perishing, and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty, and remember their misery no more. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for the household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceit, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. That is Proverbs chapter 31. Hello, kiddos, says Rebecca. So I have gotten exactly 0 recommendations from the comment box on what to read next. And seeing that it's the 1st of the month, and I've gotten 1 recommendation from one of my children, JJ, come here, over what to read next. JJ, come here. What did you recommend that we read?
John.
Okay, JJ recommends that we read John. So, and today is Daniel says he did it too, but I don't remember that. So, today is the 1st of the month. And I know we just read a whole chapter, and John, the first chapter is 51 verses, which isn't that long. But what I thought I'd do is I'd read half of the first chapter of John right now, and then I'll read the second half of the first chapter of John with chapter 2 tomorrow. And then we'll be on, in May, we'll be reading the first, second, and third until we finish John. So if you don't like that plan, then come up with another one for next month, because this is what we're going to do this month until we finish John, and then we'll figure out what else to do. John, it says the gospel according to John. I don't know if that's in the Greek or not. All right, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Oh, okay, Daniel. I'm going to read. You're going to be quiet. You understand? All right. That's what I thought. Sorry about that. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came into his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me.' For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known." And this is the testimony of John. When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" he confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Christ." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" And he answered, "No." So they said to him, "Who are you? We need to give an account to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of the one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, "Then why are you baptizing if you are neither the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water, but among you stands one you do not know, even he who comes after me, the strap of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie." These things took place in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. That's where I'm going to stop today. And like I said, tomorrow we'll finish chapter 1, and we will read all of chapter 2, which is about half the length of chapter 1. So not that it's that big of a deal, but you know. All right, so we come to the part of our storytelling time when Kimberly is going to come and give us a synopsis about yesterday's story. So take it away, Kimberly.
So last night, wait, I'm gonna try to remember. Okay, Shasta. He in 2 chapters ago he was taken by Susan and Edmund because they thought he was someone else, and so in this chapter he waits till night, and then the person who the Narnians think he is comes through the window, and apparently he had gotten into a couple fights, and he was like all beaten up and everything. So So he said, "This is how you get out, and you can go through the town this way." And he's like, "Oh, thank you." And then they become friends and everything. And the prince says, "Oh, and tell my father if we can see one another when you get over to my country that's in between Narnia and where we are now." And so then after that, he goes over to the graveyard, and it's very creepy at night. So then he spends a whole night there, and he hears jackals, and then he sees a lion, and then he looks back, and it's a cat, just a regular house cat that he'd seen earlier. I personally think it was Aslan. Who knows? But maybe okay, then he sleeps through the rest of the night with the cat. When he wakes up, the cat's gone and everything. And he goes back through there, and right when he's about to leave the place, to leave the graveyard without the horse and without Bree and the others, um, then he sees Bree and the other horse. I keep forgetting the name. Sorry. He sees Bree and the other horse, Bree and Quinn, but he doesn't see. I keep forgetting names. Sorry. I'll remember it eventually. Aravis. He doesn't see Aravis. Instead, he sees someone else, and the horses are saddled and everything. So he's like, "Oh my gosh, she was found out, and she's been tortured, and now they know I'm here, and blah 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 blah." Say hello to Kit.
I'm telling you, Kimberly remembers more of this story than I do when I'm reading. So, right.
So then that's about it, right?
I know the first word.
Pretty much.
JJ thinks he knows what the first word is.
What?
He's very right. The first word is what? All right. So chapter 7 is called Aravis in Tashban. All right. Daniel, you need to calm down. This isn't okay. That's not the way that we behave while we're reading. All righty. Aravis in Tashban, chapter 7. What had really happened was this. So you just got the synopsis. I'm about to give it to you again. When Aravis saw Shasta hurried away by the Narnians and found herself alone with 2 horses who very wisely wouldn't say a word, she never lost her head even for a moment. She grabbed Bree's halter and stood still, holding both the horses, and though her heart was beating as hard as a hammer, she did nothing to show it. As soon as the Narnian lords had passed, she tried to move on again, but before she could take a step, another crier, "Bother all these people," thought Aravis, was heard shouting, "Way! Way! Way! Way for the Tarkina Lasaralin!" And immediately following the crier came 4 armed slaves, and then 4 bearers carrying a litter which was all aflutter with silken curtains and all a jingle with silver bells, and which scented the whole street with perfumes and flowers. After the litter, female slaves in beautiful clothes, and then a few grooms, runners, pages, and the like. And now Aravis made her first mistake. She knew Lasaraline quite well, almost as if they had been at school together, because they had often stayed in the same houses and been to the same parties. And Aravis couldn't help looking up to see what Lasaraline looked like now that she was married and had a great person and a very great person indeed. It was fatal. The eyes of the 2 girls met, and immediately Lasaraline sat up in the litter and burst out at the top of her voice, "Aravis, What on earth are you doing here? Your father—" There wasn't a moment to lose. Without a second's delay, Aravis let go the horses, caught the edge of the litter, swung herself up beside La Cereline, and whispered furiously in her ear, "Shut up! Do you hear? Shut up! You must hide me! Tell your people—" "But, darling," began La Cereline in the same loud voice. She didn't in the least mind making people stare. In fact, she rather liked it. "Do what I tell you, or I'll never speak to you again," hissed Aravis. "Please, please be quick, lass. It's frightfully important. Tell your people to bring those 2 horses along, pull all the curtains of the litter, and get away somewhere where I can't be found, and do hurry." "All right, darling," said La Cereline in her lazy voice. "Here, 2 of you take the Tarquini's horses." This was to the slaves. "And now home. I say, darling, do you think we really want the curtains drawn on a day like this? I mean to say—" But Aravis had already drawn the curtains, enclosing La Cereline and herself in a rich and scented but rather stuffy kind of tent. And this is before they drew the curtains, but you can see La Cereline being carried on her litter by her servants. There she is. Well, come on and watch them. You can watch on your phone. I mean, you and Kimmy both have phones. Yes. JJ wants to say something now. In the middle of a chapter.
I was going to say, after this chapter, maybe we can read a chapter of this. Like, I could read it.
We'll see. Maybe we can do that sometime. Okay. "I mustn't be seen," she said. "My father doesn't know I'm here. I'm running away." "My dear, how perfectly thrilling," said La Cereline. "I'm dying to hear all about it. Darling, you're sitting on my dress. Do you mind? That's better. It's a new one. Do you like it? I've got it at—" "Oh, lass, do be serious," said Aravis. "Where's my father?" "Didn't you know?" said La Cereline. "He's here, of course. He came to town yesterday and is asking about you everywhere. And to think of you and me being here together and his not knowing anything about it. It's the funniest thing I've ever heard." And she went off into giggles. She always had been a terrible giggler, as Aravis now remembered. It isn't funny at all," she said. "It's dreadfully serious. Where can you hide me?" "No difficulty at all, my dear girl," said La Cereline. "I'll take you home. My husband's away and no one will see you. Phew, it's not much fun with the curtains drawn. I want to see people. There's no point in having a new dress on if there's no one, if one's gonna go about shut up like this. I heard no one heard you when you shouted out to me. I hope no one heard you when you shouted out to me like that," said Aravis. "No, no, of course, darling," said La Cereline absent-mindedly. "But you haven't even told me yet what you think of the dress." "Another thing," said Aravis, "you must tell your people to treat those 2 horses very respectfully. That's part of the secret. They're really talking horses from Narnia." "Fancy," said La Cereline. "How exciting! And, oh, darling, have you seen the barbarian queen from Narnia? She's staying in Tashbaan at the present. They say Prince Rabadash is madly in love with her. There have been the most wonderful parties and hunts and the things all this last fortnight. I can't see that she's so very pretty myself, but some of the Narnian men are lovely. I was taken out on a river party the day before yesterday, and I was wearing my— How shall we prevent your people telling everyone that you've got a visitor dressed like a beggar's brat in your house? It might so easily get around to my father." "Now don't keep fussing, there's a dear," said La Cereline. "We'll get you some proper clothes in a moment, and here we are." The bearers had stopped, and the litter was being lowered. When the curtains had been drawn, Aravis found that she was in the courtyard garden, very like the one Shasta had been taken into a few minutes earlier in another part of the city. La Cereline would have gone indoors at once, but Aravis reminded her in a frantic whisper to say something to the slaves about not telling anyone of the mistress's strange visitor. "Sorry, darling. It had gone right out of my head," said La Cereline. "Here, all of you, And you, doorkeeper, no one is to let out of the house today, to be let out of the house today, and anyone I catch talking about this young lady will be first beaten to death and then burned alive, and after that be kept on bread and water for 6 weeks. There. Although Lasraline had said she was dying to hear Aravis's story, she showed no sign of really wanting to hear it at all. She was, in fact, much better at talking than at listening. She insisted on Aravis having a long and luxurious bath, Calormene baths are famous, and then dressing her up in the finest clothes before she would let her explain anything. The fuss she made about choosing the dresses nearly drove Aravis mad. She remembered now that Lasraline had always been like that, interested in clothes and parties and gossip. Aravis had always been more interested in bows and arrows and horses and dogs and swimming. You will guess that each thought the other silly. But when at last they were both seated after a meal, it was chiefly of the whipped cream and jelly and fruit and ice sort, in a beautiful pillared room, which Aravis would have liked better if Lasraline's spoiled pet monkey hadn't been climbing about it all the time. Lasraline at last asked her why she was running away from home. When Aravis had finished telling her story, Lasraline said, "But darling, why don't you marry Ahushta Tarkan? Everyone's crazy about him. My husband says he is beginning to be one of the greatest men in Calormen. He has just been made Grand Vizier now that Axartha has died. Didn't you know?" And here is a picture of the two girls talking. Wah, 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 wah. "I don't care. I can't stand the sight of him," said Aravis. "But, darling, only think. 3 palaces, and one of them that beautiful one down on the lake at Ilkeen. Positively ropes of pearls untold, baths of donkey's milk, and you'd see such a lot of me." "He can keep his pearls and palaces as far as I'm concerned," said Aravis. "You always were a queer girl, Aravis," said Lasraline. "What more do you want?" In the end, however, Aravis managed to make her friend believe that she was in earnest and even to discuss plans. There would be no difficulty now about getting the 2 horses out of the north gate and then on to the tombs. No one would stop or question a groom in fine clothes leading a war horse and a lady's saddle horse down to the river, and Lasraline had plenty of grooms to send. It wasn't so easy to decide what to do about Aravis herself. She suggested that she could be carried out in the litter with the curtains drawn, but Lasraline told her that litters were only used in the city, and the sight of one going out through the gate would be certain to lead questions. When they had talked for a long time, and it was all the longer because Aravis found it hard to keep her friend to the point, at last Lasraline clapped her hands and said, "Oh, I have an idea. There is one way of getting out of the city without using the gates. The Tisrock's garden, may he live forever, runs right down to the water, and there is a little water door, only for the palace people, of course, but then, you know, dear," here she tittered a little, "we almost are palace people. I say, it is lucky for you that you came to me. The dear Tisrock, may he live forever, is so kind. We're asked to the palace almost every single day, and it is like a second home. I love all the dear princes and princesses, 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 and I positively adore Prince Rabadash. I might run in and see any of the palace ladies at any hour of the day or night. Why shouldn't I slip in with you after dark and let you out by the water door? There are always a few punts and things tied up outside it, and even if we were caught, all would be lost," said Aravis. "Oh, darling, don't get so excited," said Lasraline. "I was going to say, even if we were caught, everyone would only say it was one of my mad jokes. I'm getting well known for them, quite well known for them. Only the other day, do listen, dear, this is frightfully funny. I mean, it would be all lost for me," said Aravis a little sharply. Oh, yes, I do see what you mean, darling. Well, can you think of any better plan? Aravis couldn't and answered, No, we'll have to risk it. When can we start? Oh, not tonight, said Lasserline. Of course not tonight. There's a great feast on tonight. I must start getting my hair done for it in a few minutes, and the whole place will be a blaze of lights, and such a crowd, too. It would have to be tomorrow night. This was bad news for Aravis, but she had to make the best of it. The afternoon passed very slowly, and it was a relief when Lassareline went out to the banquet, for Aravis was very tired of her giggling and her talk about dresses and parties and weddings and engagements and scandals. She went to bed early, and that part she did enjoy. It was so nice to have pillows and sheets again. But the next day passed very slowly. Lasserline wanted to go back on the whole arrangement and kept on telling Aravis that Narnia was a country of perpetual snow and ice inhabited by demons and sorcerers, and she was mad to think of going there. And with the peasant boy, too, said Lasserline. Darling, think of it. It's not nice. Aravis had thought of it a good deal, but she was so tired of Lasserline's silliness by now that for the first time she began to think that traveling with Shasta was really rather more fun than fashionable life in Tashbaan. So she only replied, You forget that I'll be nobody just like him when we get to Narnia, and anyway, I promised. And to think, said Lassareline, almost crying, that if only you had sense, you could be the wife of a grand vizier. Aravis went away to have a private word with the horses. You must go with a groom a little before sunset down to the tombs, she said. No more of those packs. You'll be saddled and bridled again. But there'll have to be food in Hwyn's saddlebags and a full water-skin behind yours, Bree. The man has orders to let you both have a good long drink at the far side of the bridge. And then Narnia and the north, whispered Bree. But what if Shasta is not at the tombs? Wait for him, of course, said Aravis. I hope you've been quite comfortable. Never better stabled in my life, said Bree. But if the husband of that Pickering Tarkina friend of yours is paying his head groom to get the best oats, then I think the head groom is cheating him. Aravis and Lassareline had supper in the pillared room. About 2 hours later, they were ready to start. Aravis was dressed to look like a superior slave girl in a great house and wore a veil over her face. They had agreed that if any questions were asked, Lassareline would pretend that Aravis was a slave she was taking as a present to one of the princesses. The two girls went out on foot. A very few minutes brought them to the palace gates. Here there were, of course, soldiers on guard, but the officer knew Lassareline quite well and called his men to attention and saluted. They passed at once into the hall of black marble. A fair number of courtiers, slaves, and others were still moving about here, but this only made the two girls less conspicuous. They passed on into the hall of pillars and then into the hall of statues and down the colonnade, passing the great beaten copper doors of the throne room. It was all magnificent beyond description, what they could see of it in the dim light of the lamps. Presently they came out into the garden court, which sloped downhill in a number of terraces. On the far side of that they came to the old palace. It had already grown almost quite dark, and they now found themselves in a maze of corridors lit only by occasional torches fixed in brackets to the walls. Lassareline halted at the place where you had to go either left or right. Go on, do go on, whispered Aravis, whose heart was beating terribly, and who still felt that her father might run into them at any corner. I'm just wondering, said Lassareline. I'm not absolutely sure which way we go from here. I think it's the left. Yes, I'm almost sure it's the left. What fun this is. They took the left-hand way and found themselves in a passage that was hardly lighted at all, and which soon began going down steps. It's all right, said Lasaraline. I'm sure we're right now. I remember these steps. But at that moment a moving light appeared ahead. A second later there appeared from round a distant corner the dark shapes of two men walking backwards and carrying tall candles. And of course it is only before royalties that people walk backwards. Aravis felt Lasaraline grip her arm, that sort of sudden grip which is almost a pinch, and which means that the person who is gripping you is very frightened indeed. Aravis thought it odd that Lasaraline should be afraid of the Tisroc if he were really such a friend of hers, but there was no time to go on thinking. Lasaraline was hurrying her back to the top of the steps on tiptoes and groping wildly along the wall. Here's a door, she whispered. Quick! They went in, drew the door softly behind them, and found themselves in pitch darkness. Aravis could hear by Lasaraline's breathing that she was terrified. Tush, preserve us, whispered Lasaraline. What shall we do if he comes in here? Can we hide? There was a soft carpet under their feet. They groped forward into the room and blundered onto a sofa. Let's lie down behind it, whimpered Lasaraline. Oh, I do wish we hadn't come. There was just room between the sofa and the curtained wall, and the two girls got down. Lasaraline managed to get a better position and was completely covered. The upper part of Aravis's face stuck out behind the sofa, so that if anyone came into that room with a light and happened to look in exactly the right place, they would see her. But of course, because she was wearing a veil, what they saw would not at once look like a forehead and a pair of eyes. Aravis shoved desperately to try and make Lasaraline give her a little more room, but Lasaraline, now quite selfish in her panic, fought back and pinched her feet. They gave it up and lay still, panting a little. Their own breath seemed dreadfully noisy, but there was no other noise. Is it safe? Said Aravis at the last, in the tiniest possible whisper. I think so, began Lasaraline, but my poor nerves. And then came the most terrible noise they could have heard at that moment, the noise of the door opening. And then came light, and because Aravis couldn't get her head any further in behind the sofa, she saw everything. First came the two slaves, deaf and dumb, as Aravis rightly guessed, and therefore used at the most secret councils, walking backward and carrying the candles. They took up their stand, one at each end of the sofa. This was a good thing, for of course it was now harder for anyone to see Aravis once a slave was in front of her and she was looking between his heels. Then came an old man, very fat, wearing a curious pointed cap, by which she immediately knew that he was the Tisroc. The least of the jewels with which he was covered was worth more than all the clothes and weapons of the Narnian lords put together. But he was so fat, and such a mass of frills and pleats and baubles and buttons and tassels and talismans, that Aravis couldn't help thinking the Narnian fashions, at any rate for men, looked nicer. After him came a tall young man with a feathered and jeweled turban on his head and an ivory-sheathed scimitar at his side. He seemed very excited, and his eyes and teeth flashed fiercely in the candlelight. Last of all came a little hump-backed, wizened old man, in whom she recognized with a shudder the new Grand Vizier and her own betrothed husband, Ahoshta Tarkan himself. As soon as all three had entered the room and the door was shut, the Tisroc seated himself on the divan with a sigh of contentment. The young man took his place standing before him, and the Grand Vizier got down on his knees and elbows and laid his face flat on the carpet. Chapter 8, in the House of the Tisroc. Everyone enjoying the story so far? Oh, my father, and oh, the delight of my eyes, began the young man, muttering the words very quickly and sulkily, as if and not at all as if the Tisroc were the delight of his eyes. May you live forever, but you have utterly destroyed me. If you had given me the swiftest of the galleys at the sunrise, when I first saw that a ship of the accursed barbarians was gone from her place, I would perhaps have overtaken them, but you persuaded me to send first and see if they had not merely moved round the point into better anchorage. And now the whole day has been wasted, and they are gone, gone out of my reach, the false jade, and here he added a great many descriptions of Queen Susan, which would not look at all nice in print. For of course this young man was Prince Rabadash, and of course the false jade was Susan of Narnia. Compose yourself, O my son, said the Tisroc, for the departure of guests makes a wound that is easily healed in the heart of a judicious host. But I want her, cried the prince. I must have her. I shall die if I do not get her. False, proud, black-hearted daughter of a dog that she is. I cannot sleep. My food has no savor, and my eyes are darkened because of her beauty. I must have the barbarian queen. JJ needs water, so we can wait for him. Do 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 do. You better hurry, dude. Waiting, 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 waiting. Huh? Yeah, buffering. Circle of death. How much water did you get? Oh. Oh, Mom's gonna show you all the yarn she got today. Here she comes. Okay.
So I have 2 of these. The other one is in the other room. I'm using it already. And then these 2. These are called Sugar Wheel Cotton Sparkle. This one is called Katarina Golden Gate Sunset. And these are called Katarina Saturday Siesta. You can see them another time. Yeah.
Why?
Do you have an example of what you're making with them?
Oh, yeah, just a second.
Hi, Easton.
How about we call this merchandise?
Oh. So oh yeah, we did. Okay, so here's a picture while we're waiting. This picture's on this page. So my guess is that the Tisroc is this one that's standing up, and this one is the Grand Vizier. That's my guess, but I could be wrong. Yes. Yeah, comments. Fancy yarn, hi Easton. That was, well, a long time ago she said hello kiddos.
Hold this.
Yep. Yay.
What is it called?
It's
It's called the Virus Shaw.
All right.
Go to bed.
So we've got the whiny brat Vizier
What?
and the Tisroc, right? Okay. No, I don't say may he live forever, because I'm a free Sneathen. I'm not a Narnian, but I am a free Sneathen. So there we go. Okay, listen, this isn't. Okay, JJ wants to show you this.
Becca, I have this. I have kept the note that you gave me that started our messaging thing.
Oh, very
I have kept it forever.
You need to write her a letter. Okay. Are we gonna settle down now? I mean, the point of this is you guys are settling down and I'm reading y'all a story, right? JJ, are you gonna settle down? Promise? Okay. So we're gonna try this again. Yay. Okay. But I want her, cried the prince. I must have her. I shall die if I get her. If I do not get her, false, proud, black-hearted daughter of a dog that she is. I cannot sleep, and my food has no savor, and my eyes are darkened because of her beauty. I must have the barbarian queen. Very well, it was said by a gifted poet. Oh, this is the... Wait, okay, there's 3 people. Wait. Okay, there's the Tisroc, and so why are there 2 in the picture? That confused me. Okay, anyway. How well it was said by a gifted poet, observed the vizier, raising his face, in somewhat dusty condition, from the carpet, that deep draughts from the fountain of reason are desirable in order to extinguish the fire of youthful love. This seemed to exasperate the prince. Dog! He shouted, directing a series of well-aimed kicks at the hindquarters of the vizier. Do not dare to quote the poets to me. I have had maxims and verses flung at me all day, and I can endure them no more. I am afraid Aravis did not feel at all sorry for the vizier. The Tisroc was apparently sunk in thought, but when, after a long pause, he noticed what was happening. Okay, so what I said earlier was on this is on the prince, and that's the vizier. And the Tisroc is in the picture. Here we go. Okay. He, the Tisroc, said tranquilly, my son, by all means desist from kicking the venerable and enlightened vizier, for as a costly jewel retains its value, even if hidden in a dunghill, so old age and discretion are to be respected, even in the vile persons of our subjects. Desist, therefore, and tell us what you desire and propose. Okay, so the vizier is Rabadash. Is that right? And Rabadash is the prince. Okay, I'm confused. All right. Okay, Prince Rabadash. Right, but what's his name? I thought his name was Rabadash. Rabadash Tarkan. No? Okay. I desire and propose, O my father, said Rabadash, that you immediately call out your invincible armies and invade the thrice accursed land of Narnia and waste it with fire and sword and add it to your illimitable empire, killing their high king and all of his blood, except Queen Susan, for I must have her as my wife, though she shall learn a sharp lesson first. Understand, O my son, said the Tisroc, that no words you can speak will move me to open war against Narnia. If you were not my father, O ever-living Tisroc, said the prince, grinding his teeth, I should say that is the word of a coward. And if you were not my son, O most inflammable Rabadash, replied his father, your life would be short and your death slow when you had said it. The cool, placid voice in which he spoke these words made Aravis's blood run cold. "But why, oh my father?" said the prince. Okay, Rabadash is the prince that is going to marry Susan, and the vizier is the guy that's going to marry Aravis. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting. "But why, oh my father?" said the prince, this time in a much more respectful voice. "Why should we think twice about punishing Narnia any more than about hanging an idle slave or sending a worn-out horse to be made into dog's meat? It is not the fourth size of one of your least provinces. 1,000 spears could conquer it in 5 weeks. It is an unseemly blot on the skirts of your empire." "Most undoubtedly," said the Tisroc, "these little barbarian countries that call themselves free, which is as much as to say idle, disordered, and unprofitable, are hateful to the gods and to all persons of discernment. Then why have we suffered such a land as Narnia to remain thus long unsubdued? Know, O enlightened prince." Sorry, this is the vizier. "Know one, O enlightened prince," said the grand vizier, "that until the year in which your exalted father began his salutary and unending reign, the land of Narnia was covered with ice and snow, and was moreover ruled by a most powerful enchantress." "This I know very well, O loquacious vizier," answered the prince, "but I know also that the enchantress is dead, and the ice and snow have vanished, so that Narnia is now wholesome, fruitful, and delicious. And this change, O most learned prince, has doubtless been brought to pass by a powerful incantations of those wicked persons who now call themselves kings and queens of Narnia." "I am rather of the opinion," said Rabadash, "that it has come about by the alteration of the stars and the operation of natural causes." "All this," said the Tisroc, "is a question for the disputations of learned men. I will never believe that so great an alteration and the killing of the old enchantress were effected without the aid of strong magic. And such things are to be expected in that land, which is chiefly inhabited by demons in the shape of beasts that talk like men, and monsters that are half man and half beast. It is commonly reported that the High King of Narnia, whom may the gods utterly reject, is supported by a demon of hideous aspect and irresistible maleficence. I think it's a root of maleficent, who appears in the shape of a lion. Therefore, the attacking of Narnia is a dark and doubtful enterprise, and I am determined not to put my hand out farther than I can draw it back." "How blessed is Calormen," said the vizier, popping up his face again, "on whose ruler the gods have been pleased to bestow prudence and circumspection. Yet, as the irrefutable and sapient Tisroc has said, it is very grievous to be constrained to keep our hands off such a dainty dish as Narnia. Gifted was that poet who said," but at this point Ahoshta noticed an impatient movement of the prince's toe and became suddenly silent. "It is very grievous," said the Tisroc in his deep, quiet voice. "Every morning the sun is darkened in my eyes, and every night my sleep is less refreshing, because I remember that Narnia is still free." "Oh, my father," said Rabadash, "how if I show you a way by which you can stretch out your arm to take Narnia, and yet draw it back unharmed if the attempt prove unfortunate?" "If you can show me that, O Rabadash," said the Tisroc, "you will be the best of sons." "Here then, O father, this very night and this very hour I will take but 200 horse and ride across the desert, and it shall seem to all men that you know nothing of my going. On the second morning I shall be at the gates of King Lune's castle of Anvard in Arkenland. They are at peace with us and unprepared, and I shall take Anvard before they have bestirred themselves. Then I will ride through the pass above Anvard and down through Narnia to Cair Paravel. The High King will not be there. When I left them, he was already preparing a raid against the giants on the northern border. I shall find Cair Paravel most likely with open gates and ride in. I shall exercise prudence and courtesy and spill as little Narnian blood as I can. And what then remains but to sit there till the Splendor Hyaline puts in with Queen Susan on board, catch my strayed bird as she sets foot ashore, swing her into the saddle, and then ride back to Anvard. But it is not probable, O my son, said the Tisroc, that at the taking of the woman, either King Edmund or you will lose your life. They will be a small company, said Rabadash, and I will order 10 of my men to disarm and bind him, restraining my vehement desire for his blood, so that there shall be no deadly cause of war between you and the High King. And how if the Splendor Hyaline is at Cair Paravel before you? I do not look for that with these winds, O my father. And lastly, O my resourceful son, said the Tisroc, you have made clear how all this might give you the barbarian woman, but not how it helps me to the overthrowing of Narnia. Oh, my father, can it have escaped you that though I and my horsemen will come and go through Narnia like an arrow from a bow, yet we shall have Anvard forever, and when you hold Anvard, you sit at the very gate of Narnia, and your garrison in Anvard can be increased by little and little till it is a great host. It is spoken with understanding and foresight, but how do I draw back my arm if all this miscarries? You shall say that I did it without your knowledge and against your will and without your blessing, being constrained by the violence of my love and the impetuosity of youth. And how if the High King then demands that we send back the barbarian woman, his sister? Oh, my father, be assured that he will not. For though the fancy of a woman has rejected this marriage, the High King Peter is a man of prudence and understanding, who will in no way wish to lose the high honor and advantage of being allied to our house and seeing his nephew and grandnephew on the throne of Calormen. He will not see that, if I live forever, as is no doubt your wish, said the Tisroc in an even drier voice than usual. And also, O my father, and O the delight of my eyes, said the prince after a moment of awkward silence, we shall write letters as if from the queen to say that she loves me and has no desire to return to Narnia, for it is well known that women are as changeable as weathercocks, and even if they do not wholly believe the letter, they will not dare to come to Tashbaan in arms to fetch her. O enlightened vizier, said the Tisroc, bestow your wisdom upon us concerning this strange proposal. O eternal Tisroc, answered Ahoshta, the strength of paternal affection is not unknown to me, and I have often heard that sons are in the eyes of their father more precious than carbuncles. How then shall I dare freely to unfold to you my mind in a matter which may imperil the life of this exalted prince? Undoubtedly you will dare, replied the Tisroc, because you will find that the dangers of not doing so are at least equally great. To hear is to obey, moaned the wretched man. Know then, O most reasonable Tisroc, in the first place, that the danger of the prince is not altogether so great as it might appear. For the gods have withheld from the barbarians the light of direction, as that their poetry is not, like ours, full of choice apothegms and useful maxims, but is all of love and war. Therefore nothing will appear to them more noble and admirable than such a mad enterprise as this of Ow! For the prince at the word mad had kicked him. Desist, O my son, said the Tisroc, and you, estimable vizier, whether he desists or not, by no means allow the flow of your eloquence to be interrupted, for nothing is more suitable to persons of gravity and decorum than to endure minor inconveniencies with constancy. To hear is to obey, said the vizier, wriggling himself round a little so as to get his hinder parts further away from Rabadash's toe. Nothing I say will seem as pardonable, if not esteemable in their eyes, as this hazardous attempt, especially because it is undertaken for the love of a woman. Therefore, if the prince by misfortune fell into their hands, they would assuredly not kill him. Nay, it may even be that though he failed to carry off the queen, yet the sight of his great valor and the extremity of his passion might incline her heart to him. This is a very good point, old babbler, said Rabadash. Very good. However, it came into your ugly head. The praise of my masters is the light of my eyes, said Ahoshta. And secondly, O Tisroc, whose reign must and shall be interminable, I think that with the aid of the gods, it is very likely that Anvard will fall into the prince's hands. And if so, we have Narnia by the throat. There was a long pause, and the room became so silent that the two girls hardly dared to breathe. At last, the Tisroc spoke. Go, my son, he said, and do as you have said, but expect no help nor countenance from me. I will not avenge you if you are killed, and I will not deliver you if the barbarians cast you into prison. And if, either in success or failure, you shed a drop more than you need of Narnian noble blood, and open war arises from it, my favor shall never fall upon you again, and your next brother shall have your place in Calomen. Now go, be swift, secret, and fortunate. May the strength of Tash be the inexorable, the irresistible be in your sword and lance. To hear is to obey, cried Rabadash, and after kneeling for a moment to kiss his father's hand, he rushed from the room, greatly to the disappointment of Erebus, who was now horribly cramped. The Tisroc and Vizier remained. O Vizier, said the Tisroc, is it certain that no living soul knows of this council we three have held here tonight? Oh, my master, it is not possible that any should know. For that very reason I proposed, and you in your infallible wisdom agreed that we should meet here in the old palace, where no council is ever held, and none of the household has any occasion to come. It is well, said the Tisroc. If any man knew, I would see to it that he died before an hour had passed. And do you also, O prudent vizier, forget it? I sponge away from my own heart and from yours all knowledge of the prince's plans. He is gone without my knowledge or my consent. I know not whither, because of his violence and the rash and disobedient disposition of youth. No man will be more astonished than you and I to hear that Anvard is in his hands. To hear is to obey, said Ahoshta. That is why you will never think, even in your secret heart, that I am the hardest-hearted of fathers who thus sent my son, my firstborn son, on an errand so likely to be his death, pleasing as it must be to you who do not love the prince, for I see into the bottom of your mind. O impeccable Tisroc, said the vizier, in comparison with you I love neither the prince nor my own life, nor bread, nor water, nor light, nor the sun. Your sentiments, said the Tisroc, are elevated and correct. I also love none of these things in comparison with the glory and strength of my throne. If the prince succeeds, we have Archenland and perhaps hereafter Narnia. If he fails, I have 18 other sons, and Rabadash after the manner of the eldest sons of kings was beginning to be dangerous. More than 5 Tisrocs in Tashban have died before their time because their eldest sons, enlightened princes, grew tired of waiting for their throne. He had better cool his blood abroad than boil it in inaction here. And now, O excellent vizier, the excess of my paternal anxiety inclines me to sleep. Command the musicians to my chamber, but before you lie down, call back the pardon we wrote for the third cook. I feel within me the manifest prognosis of indigestion. To hear is to obey, said the Grand Vizier. He crawled backward on all fours to the door, rose, bowed, and went out. Even then the Tisroc remained seated in silence on the divan till Aravis almost began to be afraid that he had dropped asleep. But at last, with a great creaking and sighing, he heaved up his enormous body, signed to the slaves to precede him with the lights, and went out. The door closed behind him. The room was once more totally dark, and the 2 girls could breathe freely again. I just had one more picture to show you. Here is the Tisroc with the 2 deaf and mute slaves that are holding his lights. There they are. And chapter 9 is called Across the Desert, and the first word is how. So we will save that one for tomorrow. JJ's asleep. So, yes, we will save, what's it called? Across the Desert for tomorrow. You never sent me a message, though. I told Kimberly to send you a message. Yeah, so that's me sending a message. How can I send a message while I'm trying to talk to you? Well, I mean, while I'm trying to read to you. Okay, so no, Rebecca. Oh, good night. Love you, Becca. We miss you. Daniel says good night. Mom says good night. Kimmy's going to show you a picture. There's her picture. Yay. It's some kind of Pokemon. It's an Incineroar. Yay. Okay, so God bless you. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow. And can't wait. I'm glad that you got the airline tickets worked out. That's great. Okay, good night.